Who are India's true friends?
No friends. No friends.
Not even Russia.
Well, we have walked away from Russia, it looks like. These Gen Z protests typically have underlying patterns.
But Gen Z though is angry everywhere all the time.
You tap into that anger, right? Gen Z is
Right.
typically frustrated, lost, clueless, angry, all that.
Yeah.
So you tap into that. I admire China for this. They know how to play the narrative game.
Yeah.
They know how to play the war, the propaganda war.
And they've developed the bloody place.
They developed the place. What is India doing? The government of the US has a contract with Anthropic. They use Anthropic for military purposes. Anthropic says that we are not okay with you using this to autonomously kill human beings. There were Gen Z protests in Bangkok a couple of years ago.
Correct.
Which
Yeah.
came out of nowhere and also disappeared into nowhere. It was into thin air. So these things can be unleashed on demand.
Yeah.
And they can also be switched off on demand.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a pattern the Americans have perfected.
Yeah.
Look, in geopolitics, there are no real friends. It's all allies and adversarial relationships, and everything is kind of in flux. Everything is kind of temporary. I mean, India kept Russia afloat after the Ukraine war by purchasing so much Russian oil so that Russia doesn't become completely dependent on China. And India saved Russia at the time. But now, India has walked out of this. Why has the government of India never bothered to play the game? Why doesn't India have a propaganda outlet like the BBC, like the CNN, like the CCTN? Every nation has these things. India has nothing. In 1947, India had Asia's most powerful navy, most powerful air force, most powerful land-based military. We were Asia's number one superpower. At the time, China was in ruins. Japan was in ruins. India was the preeminent Asian power.
Yeah.
And we let it all go to the dogs.
Yeah.
But it looks like the government of India now needs US approval to do certain things.
Right. Who are India's true friends?
No friends. No friends.
Not even Russia.
Well, we have walked away from Russia, it looks like. We stopped buying Russian oil.
Yeah, if I were Russia, I would be very angry.
Of course you'd be. Right? It's a very
And it looks
long-standing
bad because
relationship
we look meekly in front of them.
We've caved into the American pressure, haven't we?
Right after like so much of photo ops with Putin. Days after that.
Very soon after that.
Yeah.
Look, in geopolitics, there are no real friends. It's all allies and adversarial relationships, and everything is kind of in flux. Everything is kind of temporary. Some relationships are long-standing, like India-Russia. But right now, it's not on very good footing, obviously. Yeah. India has walked away from the joint venture in Mali. Yeah. India has walked away from buying Russian oil, which is a very big thing, right? I mean, India kept Russia afloat after the Ukraine war by purchasing so much Russian oil so that Russia doesn't become completely dependent on China. And India saved Russia at the time. But now, India has walked out of this. So, who are India's friends today? I mean, we have a strategic relationship, let's say, with France. We have a strategic relationship with Israel.
Yeah.
We have an increasingly warm and fruitful relationship with the United States.
Sure.
Okay. And I don't know. I'm sure we have nice relationships with other countries like Mauritius and whatnot. But so we have good relationships with many nations. But which nations will stand with us if needed in times of times of trouble? I can't think of any.
Do you think there's a pattern to all the Gen Z protests that are happening, like in Nepal, in Bangladesh, even in Iran? I don't know how it'll play out, but I'm sure they'll find a millennial angle to justify the anger that's there.
These Gen Z protests typically have underlying patterns. Okay, these Gen Z folks who are protesting, they typically are.
But Gen Z though is angry everywhere all the time.
So you tap into that anger, right? Gen Z is typically frustrated, lost, clueless, angry, all that.
Yeah.
So you tap into that. So when there's a Gen Z protest somewhere, there are certain common patterns you see everywhere. It's typically Gen Z kids from very affluent universities.
Right.
They're typically English educated. They speak English very well. They are studying in the English medium. They come from generally wealthy families.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least the ones that are visible. And then there's a bunch of cannon fodder who have no idea what's happening, but they're protesting because it's cool to protest.
Yeah.
For example, there were Gen Z protests in Bangkok a couple of years ago.
Correct.
Which came out of nowhere
Yeah.
and also disappeared into nowhere. It was into thin air. So these things can be unleashed on demand.
Yeah.
And they can also be switched off on demand.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a pattern the Americans have perfected.
Right.
They started it, how did it start? It started with the pop, the flower revolution, the tulip revolution, etc., which you had in the early 2000s in Central Asia.
Yeah.
You had something in Kyrgyzstan. You had something somewhere else also, right? Then you had the Arab Spring, which was a refined version of that. The Arab Spring movements you had in multiple countries. Then you had the Euromaidan coup, which also looked like this color revolution thing, but it was actually a coup. And then you have all these things happening in various countries, which are like, now it's being called a Gen Z thing.
Yeah.
So in Nepal, it was called a Gen Z revolution or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's all artificially engineered. It's astroturfed.
Yeah.
You typically you spend many years creating the assets on the ground in various countries.
And you activate them.
And you
whenever
activate them
want
on demand. You will cultivate professors. You will cultivate politicians who are disaffected. Politicians from opposition parties. You will cultivate maybe business people. You will cultivate lots of media people and so on
Yeah.
to create this entire illusion that this is all organic and spontaneous and all. But it's all and obviously you need funding for all these things. You need the brains and all. So that's how it is done. It takes years to do this. But once you have the assets in place, you can unleash it on demand.
Interesting. Do you think so? China in all of this is where exactly? Because there are rumors that Xi Jinping is not in the greatest of his health, and that there may be somebody else who will be taking over. And if that happens, every Chinese premier also has its own way of looking at administration, foreign policy, etc. And at the same time, they have the issue of Panchen Lama. They want to make sure that this whole Dalai Lama issue is put to rest after this. Where is China standing at this point?
China is being uncharacteristically subdued and spectatorial.
They've been very quiet.
They've been very quiet. Typically, Chinese are very proactive.
Yeah.
Their Ministry of Foreign Affairs is very proactive and very aggressive.
Correct. Yeah.
They have been incredibly
television
silent.
channels.
Yeah, they have been incredibly quiet.
Yeah.
They
And they've been reaching out to us as well.
well, it's too late for that.
Yeah.
If they had reached out to us 5 years ago and demarcated the
We could
border,
have done
then
something.
things would have turned out very differently.
Yeah.
It's too late for that now.
Right.
What's the point of them reaching out to us now? I mean, it's whatever problems they're facing, they are of their own making.
Yeah.
Their relationship with India, this abnormal relationship that we have, it's entirely of China's own making.
Yeah.
Look, Xi Jinping, I have no idea what's happening to him. Okay, the Chinese system is incredibly opaque.
Yeah.
You have no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
The Chinese sacked 13 generals in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Right, Xi Jinping. A couple of generals were recently sacked, and they were allegedly they were accused of selling state secrets to the US or whatnot. That's again Western media that's reporting this. It's not the Chinese government that's reported that. They have simply the Chinese government statements have simply accused these generals of extreme indiscipline and so on and so forth.
Right.
Right. So clearly there's issues in China. I don't know about Xi Jinping's health on board. I mean, there were even stories that there was a shootout in a hotel where Xi Jinping was staying and whatnot.
Okay.
All kinds of strange stories come out, but what's the basis? Nothing. It's all fabrications essentially, because the Chinese system is so opaque, you don't know what's happening in there.
Yeah.
So we can't really pay attention to these, to take these rumors very seriously. As far as I see things, Xi Jinping is business as usual. Everything is fine with him. Right. When it comes to the Panchen Lama and all that, well, it's beyond India's remit now. It's out of India's hands.
Right.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama must be around 90 now, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty elderly.
Yeah.
Let's hope he lives to 100 or maybe even beyond. But eventually he will have to leave his body, as all human beings need to do, because he's a human incarnation of a great soul. So the question is, what happens then? Has His Holiness, proclaimed one of three things? Either he will not be reborn, he will attain moksha, nirvana, and not return to a mortal form.
Yeah.
Or will he be reincarnated in Chinese occupied Tibet? Or will he be reincarnated in India? Or will he be reincarnated somewhere else? He needs to be very clear about this, and he needs to make a statement before it's too late. Once he makes a statement to whatever effect, then maybe the government of India can take it forward. So let's say the Dalai Lama says that in my next birth, I will be reincarnated as a Tibetan child in India, or in Juhu, or in Chanakyapuri, or wherever. Then the government of India can take action, and whatever the Chinese do, it will then be seen as illegitimate.
Right, correct.
So I think the onus is on His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
But why is there a hesitation?
I'm not sure. Okay. Has he made it? I'm not 100% certain whether he has made any statement or not.
I think he may have made, but
Okay, I'm not very clear about that. So hopefully, if he has made it, then that clarifies things to a very large extent. The Chinese obviously will try to hijack the institution of the Dalai Lama. They will try to install a CCP Dalai Lama, a Chinese Communist Party Dalai Lama, who is a card-carrying member of the Chinese Communist Party and holds Mao's Red Book or whatever.
Yeah.
The Chinese will try that.
Yeah.
So
I've been seeing a lot of YouTubers going to Lhasa taking the train. Have you seen these videos? Extremely cinematically produced. They're
haven't.
normal American YouTubers.
Americans, are they?
Yes.
Okay.
White people, Caucasians.
Okay,
Essentially, maybe Europeans as well.
I see.
And they go there. They obviously have a guide who's talking like English
Yes,
and all
of
of that.
course.
And they drink. It's not the yak milk, but yak is the male. I think
The female
male
yak,
and-
with
the
salt,
female
with salt, right?
Yeah. They do all of that, and then they were saying, "What? This is Tibet? Oh my God, this is Tibet. We thought Tibet was from 7 years in Tibet. This is how it was."
I admire China for this. They know how to play the narrative game.
Yeah.
They know how to play the war, the propaganda war.
And they've developed the bloody place.
They developed the place. What is India doing?
Yeah,
Why is India not even playing the game?
yeah,
I mean, every nation pushes forth propaganda.
Yeah.
Every nation has multiple propaganda outlets like the BBC, CNN, Deutsche Welle.
I want to
so
know
on.
what is happening in Arunachal.
Okay.
How much the Indian government is doing.
I have no
But
idea.
why is India always so opaque about
I have no
what
idea.
is happening on the borders?
Yeah, I agree with you.
We know that there are border villages programs and things like that. Maybe Abhijit Chavda can go there.
Maybe I would. Yeah. I don't mind visiting border areas. Yeah, it's fun. So the government of India needs to be proactive on these things.
Yeah.
Put forth the Indian narrative vigorously in a manner that looks natural and organic. Like having foreign tourists coming and visiting and making videos and stuff.
Yeah.
That's a pretty organic way of doing things. Maybe it's propaganda or whatever, but every nation does it. Every nation plays the game.
Yeah.
India chooses not to play the game.
Yeah.
Why has the government of India never bothered to play the game? Why doesn't India have a propaganda outlet like the BBC, like the CNN, like the CCTN? Every nation has these things. India has nothing.
Correct.
India has something called Doordarshan, but we don't use it at all.
Yeah.
I simply fail to understand why the government of India is so lax in this matter. It's frustrating and inexplicable.
Yeah. There's a common question that we received. We did a series on Islamization of the Indian subcontinent, of Pakistan, of Bangladesh, and it was like we use a lot of credible sources, like proper empirical evidence, to say that like this was the process through which, like, say, Sindh was Islamized. These are the conquests that happened. And it's been very well received.
Okay.
So one of the common questions that people ask is that, if when Islamic conquests happened all over the subcontinent and all across the world at some point, why did, is it only because of geography or some other reasons? Why did Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, parts of India, it was never, they were never able to breach it?
Yeah, interesting question. So the Islamic takeover of India, various parts of India, first of all, it was the Arabs who tried it. Muhammad bin Qasim in Sindh, and it worked to a certain extent. And then you have the Turks who start, intruding into India from the northwest.
Yeah.
The first region in India which was taken over by the Turks was Gandhar, Afghanistan. Right? It was the original Kashmir, let's say,
Yeah.
Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It was India. Right? And eventually over centuries they were very persistent.
Right.
Indians resisted for centuries, the Rajputs and so on. But eventually by the 1500s, the Turks started taking over large parts of India. Now, why did they not take over, let's say, China? Why did they not take over the northwest, the far east of India, Assam and Arunachal and all that? Why not? Because it was geographically distant. It was hard to reach. Okay? If you want to take over China, you have to cross Tibet.
Yeah.
You have to cross the inhospitable terrain and climate of Tibet. Have you been to Ladakh?
But yeah.
It's very hard to breathe there. I have
very
seen 20-year-old kids getting dizzy. Okay, it's very hard to breathe there.
Yeah.
Tibet is like Ladakh. It's like minus 30 degrees in winter, minus 35, minus 40 in winter, and extremely high altitudes.
But they crossed all the way and they went to Bangladesh, Indonesia. Indonesia as well is like an Islamic nation today.
Yeah, because they went through the plains of India,
Oh, right. Yeah.
of the subcontinent.
Right.
They don't go via the Himalayas.
By the-
That was too far. It was too difficult even for the Turks,
Yeah.
who were nomads.
Yeah.
Right. So it was geography that saved China. Of course, if you look at places like East Turkestan, present-day Xinjiang,
Yeah.
I mean, you have Turks there.
Yeah.
The Uyghurs. Who are the Uyghurs? They are the descendants of Turkic invaders,
Yeah.
the males, and the local Tokharian females. They're like half Indian, half Turkic people. The Uyghurs. Okay. So the Turks did take over what is the...
Is this one of
Xinjiang.
the reasons why China has probably a historical distrust over those people?
In the 1850s, there were multiple rebellions in this region. The Dungan Revolution, the Hui Rebellion and so on. And the Chinese had to resort to tremendous amounts of force to quell these Islamic rebellions against Chinese rule.
Okay.
Like 50 million people died, that sort of thing. That's not a
That's
small
crazy.
number.
Yeah, that's a big number.
It's not a small number, 50 million.
Yeah.
the Chinese had to resort to extreme violence to quell these rebellions
By Chinese, you mean?
by the local Muslims.
Right.
Of East Turkestan, etc., which is now called Xinjiang.
Yeah.
Right? So the Chinese have faced a lot of issues because of this. So if you look at the present day nation of China, the western part of China, you have Muslims there. Right? So it was taken over by Muslims, that region. But not mainland China itself.
Correct.
See, the main Han regions of China are the eastern parts of China.
Correct, yeah.
The Yellow
So
River,
very
Huanghe
far
and all
away,
that.
yeah.
There's almost no Islamic presence there because it's just too far.
Why another popular question that we get is that when Buddhism is thriving globally or did thrive globally, Sri Lanka, Tibet, etc., I mean outside of India, essentially, why did it die out in India?
Well, see, Buddhism, first of all, it's not some separate religion.
Yeah.
It is part of the Dharmic umbrella. In the Dharmic umbrella, we have so many different schools of thought. We have Nyaya, we have Vaisheshik, we have Yoga, we have Jaina, we have Mimamsa, we have Vedanta, we have Bodha, we have Sikha, we have so many different schools of thought. And Bodha is simply one of these schools of thought. Okay? All these schools of thought, they essentially have different models or conceptions of the universe. Some schools of thought say that maybe the soul, the Atma exists, but God doesn't exist. Some say that God exists, but Atma may not exist, and some say both exist, and so on. So Bodha is kind of a Nastika school of thought. It says there is no God, but Atma exists, and Atma is not permanent, that sort of thing. So it is simply one of the schools of thought which we had in ancient India, and it was artificially elevated to a global status by one emperor, Ashok.
Right.
Okay, it came up artificially. It was actually one of the fringe schools of thought in India. You had so many. You had so many at the time. The Ajivikas were one that the Ashok squashed. Yeah, he destroyed the Ajivika school of thought. He massacred them all, and he elevated the Bodha school of thought. So it was elevated artificially by Ashok, his patronage. His grandson Shali, I forget his name, he was a Jaina. He built thousands of Jaina temples. So we've had kings and emperors who have promoted various whatever was their favorite school of thought. Essentially a philosophical school of thought.
Right.
So because of Ashok, the Bodha school of thought became a global phenomenon. He exported it to other countries, right? To Suvarnabhumi, which is Thailand, Southeast Asia, to Sri Lanka, and so on. And that's why it became a global phenomenon. It eventually reached China and whatnot, and through China, Japan, South Korea, etc. But see, in a place like India, things evolve. There's always constant evolution, this constant churn. So sometimes one school of thought becomes prominent, then something else emerges, and that becomes popular and prominent. So it's a natural, organic process. It's not something that happened over 3 weekends. It's something that happened over 2,500 years.
Yeah.
So natural evolution, natural societal and civilizational evolution, things come up and things go down and things replace it. That sort of thing.
We always hear that, it's the martial races who were always, ruling empires and part of the armies and so to speak. The Rajputs, Gaudas, whatever, different communities, right? But in India, you also have examples of, say, leadership at different points in history which are, say, driven by other communities like the Guptas and the Mauryas and other subaltern communities, even tribal communities, for example.
We've had Shudra kings.
Yeah.
We've had Shudra kings in India. The allegation that's made against us and our civilization is that we had this ossified, calcified, four-pronged caste system, and there was absolutely zero social mobility. If you were born in a so-called lower caste, then you were there forever, and that was it. That is so wrong. That is a lie. You had kings who were of Shudra origin. Who was Kalidasa? Kalidasa was one of our greatest scholars and writers, right? He was a Shudra.
Correct.
Who was the Rishi Valmiki?
Correct.
He was, if you look at his early life, it's not the nicest early life, right? So in India, it was not like we don't have any social mobility. In India, we had the Jati system, the Varna Jati system. The Jatis were occupation-based bloodlines. And you had thousands of occupations in India.
And you were not forced into it.
Nothing was forced. Nothing was forced. And people married within their own jati in order to preserve the intellectual property and not have it leak out to some other community. Right? That's why people married within that. So in India, India was essentially the world's first ever fully industrialized civilization. Go back 5,000, 6,000 years to the mature Harappan phase. of India's history, it was fully industrialized and fully urbanized, right? And we had all kinds of occupations in India. Our society is like more than 10,000 years old. It's evolved over time. In any functioning society, you're going to have organization, you're going to have hierarchy, and you're going to have structure. Look at any corporation, look at the military, there's hierarchy, there's structure. Without a structure and hierarchy, you don't have a functioning organization or functioning society. And in India, this process happened over thousands of years. So India was a very well-organized society, and now that is being used to demonize us, and that's the issue. You see?
If you were to describe whether India, I mean, it's a dumb question, but the US has a certain economic model. So did the Soviets. Now the Chinese largely have communism with Chinese characteristics. Is there anything that we can define about India, or is there any school of thought from India that would perhaps set as a template for us?
Well, if you look at the pre-occupation economy of India, it was kind of what they would call today a laissez-faire economy. A laissez-faire economy means the state doesn't interfere too much.
Right.
The state says, okay, we're going to fix a certain rate of taxation.
Yeah.
You guys do whatever you want as long as you don't break the law.
Right.
Okay. And at the end of the year or at a certain time in a year, we will tax you a certain percentage, maybe 20%, 25%, whatever it is. And that's it.
Right.
And you carry on doing whatever you want. It's called a laissez-faire model. The government doesn't interfere too much.
Yeah.
That's the kind of model we had. And
Isn't that close to capitalism?
That is very close to capitalism.
Yeah.
It is, you could say, dharmic capitalism.
Capitalism.
Dharmic capitalism. So the Chinese model is actually, it's actually capitalism with Chinese characteristics.
Yeah.
It's not so communism or socialism.
Correct.
Right? They call it communism, socialism as a title they put on top of it. But it's actually capitalism with Chinese. It's state-controlled capitalism, essentially, what China has. The US also has state-controlled capitalism, but they call it, they pretend like it's laissez-faire capitalism.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what's happening to
pioneers of it.
Look at what's happening to Anthropic right now. The Anthropic is this big AI company. They have come up with this model called Claude. Yeah. It's apparently the most powerful AI system in the world right now. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, the government of the US has a contract with Anthropic. And they use Anthropic for military purposes.
Right.
They allegedly used the Claude model to target Iranian air bases and whatnot just now, like last couple of days. But there's this dispute that they have with Claude. With the Anthropic company. Anthropic says that we are not okay with you using this for autonomous targeting of human beings and mass surveillance of American civilians. Yeah. Okay? Our systems are still not rigorous and robust enough that you can use them to autonomously kill human beings.
Right, because there will be a margin of error on the principles of morality.
All that, yeah. Okay. Because there's a margin of error which brings in ethical and moral issues. Sure. Right? So the government of the US government is extremely upset with Anthropic, and they have cancelled their contract of $200 billion,
right.
And they are giving it to OpenAI. Right? So you can see that it's very clearly state-controlled capitalism. Yeah. It's not laissez-faire capitalism.
Yeah. Correct.
All these big companies, they are geopolitical assets of the US, whether it is SpaceX, whether it's OpenAI, whatever. Yeah. So that's the American model. It's state-controlled capitalism. In China also, you have the Chinese hero worship the US. The Chinese seek to emulate everything the US does. So the Chinese also have a very similar model. In India, historically, we had laissez-faire capitalism, dharmic capitalism. Right? That's what we had historically. Correct. And that's what worked for us for thousands of years. And now we're bringing in all these foreign ideas and whatnot, and it's caused a mess in India.
There's supposed to be, how strong is the Indian lobby in Washington? Because we've always heard about how strong the Pakistani lobby is, and to what degree can these lobbies, what can these lobbies actually do?
I was not aware there's an Indian lobby in Washington.
It's not a formal lobby, but yeah.
I have not. Look,
neither is it organized, perhaps.
Since I was a kid, 1980s, 1990s onwards, I've heard of the Pakistani lobby in America. Okay, yeah. The Pakistanis they hire the most expensive lobbying firms.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, they pay them top dollar, which they're getting from the US anyway. Yeah. They recycle it into the US, and they get their work done in the US. And the government of India historically, for whatever reason, has refused historically to employ lobbying firms or high quality lobbying firms. Recently, I've heard that we have hired some lobbying firms, but I'm not aware of what the results have been like. So I'll not comment about that. So historically, India has been very lax about these things. Yeah. India simply doesn't care about doing these things. I don't understand why.
Will there be tensions on the Af-Pak border, especially because we've seen so many statements being issued, and despite the Taliban being the Taliban, I think there are calculated. They clearly have calculated strategies as far as the Durand line is concerned.
There's a state of war right now between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The Pakistanis a few days ago, maybe a week or so ago, launched airstrikes on Afghan civilians, killing a bunch of Afghan civilians in various parts of Afghanistan. So naturally, the government of Afghanistan has responded to that, retaliated, and they've hit multiple Pakistani border posts, taken over a bunch of border posts, shot down at least a couple of Pakistani fighter planes, launched drone strikes at various Pakistani military installations. It's a state of war right now between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And the Taliban is being extremely proactive at putting everything that's happening on social media.
Right.
It's very clear. The Pakistanis can't hide. It's very clear that this is happening, and so many assets have been taken out, and so many Pakistani soldiers have been captured, and so on. It's very clear. The Afghans are so proactive, more proactive than the government of India. Okay? So that's the situation. Now, the Durand Line, obviously, it's an artificial line drawn by the British. The Taliban, who are Pashtun nationalists, don't recognize the Durand Line, because on both sides of the Durand Line, you have Pashtuns who are living there. So the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, that is apparently part of Pakistan, should be part of Afghanistan. So there is a gigantic border dispute between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And as long as that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is within Pakistan, the two nations will not have peace. Okay? So that's the situation. So India and Afghanistan are on the same side, essentially. India, Afghanistan, Iran. Actually,
but if you look at the region around those border areas, like obviously the human development indices are very low. But still, it seems to be a priority for both the nations to preserve some of the territories or to claim back. So historically, was it always like that, or is it the geography makes it so important for a state like that to basically?
Let me explain the genesis of this entire border dispute.
Yeah.
So you see, the Afghans, we know that Afghanistan Gandhar was the first portion of India that fell to the Turkic invaders about 1,000 years ago. The Ghoris were actually Buddhists, and then they converted to Islam, and then became the Ghoris that terrorized India for a while.
Yeah.
And then you had the Ghaznavis and so on.
Yeah.
So in the 17th, 18th century, etc. I don't remember exactly when, but around that time, the Afghans, okay, they occupied parts of Kashmir and other parts there was still Hindu majority, and terrorized the population, genocided the population, were extremely brutal, extremely cruel. So then when the Sikh Empire rose up, we had Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who was this great warrior king. What he did was he evicted the Afghans from Kashmir and other occupied parts of India, and just to punish them, he took over various parts of Afghanistan also and made them part of the Sikh Empire.
Yeah, yeah.
Then, after Maharaja Ranjit Singh's demise, the Sikh Empire disintegrates very rapidly, and the British take over the Sikh Empire. And they keep the same geography, including the Afghan territories that the Sikh Empire included.
Yeah.
And that eventually becomes British India. And that eventually becomes the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. But it includes areas that are Pashtun dominated and historically Pashtun territories. So that's why there's a border dispute. That's why there are Pashtun territories that are within Pakistan today.
Right.
And Afghanistan does not recognize that as part of Pakistan. And that's why we have a border dispute. And I am on the side of Afghanistan in this matter.
If we were to make any alternative foreign policy choices post-1947, what do you think we should have done?
We should have fully industrialized in the 1940s, 50s, 60s itself. Why did we wait until 1992 to open up the economy? Why didn't we follow the strategy of China? The strategy and the policies China followed in the 80s and 90s onwards, we could have done the same thing post-47.
Yeah.
In 1947, India had Asia's most powerful navy, most powerful air force, most powerful land-based military. We were Asia's number one superpower. Power. At the time, China was in ruins. Japan was in ruins. India was the preeminent Asian power.
Yeah.
And we let it all go to the dogs.
Yeah.
So if we had industrialized then, if we had allowed foreign investment on our terms, we will provide the cheap labor. We'll manufacture everything for you, and you can sell it in your countries for a big profit. Imagine how quickly India would have grown at the time.
Right.
So much India could have done at the time,
So what should our immediate strategy be, especially because we are already contained within the subcontinent, and then Pakistan, it's going bad. With China, it's going bad. With Bangladesh, it's going bad. Mauritius.
But with the US, it's going good now. We're friends.
Yeah.
So what we should do is this. Leverage the friendship that we have with the US now. If it's friendship, if you want to call it friendship, leverage it.
Sure.
Acquire technology from them.
Yeah.
Reform the Indian bureaucracy, the Indian institutions, reform the education system, create a high quality population, build up the Indian Navy, build up thousands of missiles, all that stuff we can do.
Yeah.
Maybe have a 20-year plan of where we want to be in 20 years' time. Let's say we want to be a $20 trillion economy by 2047. So how do we get there? Right now we have $4.5 trillion economy. How do we get to $20 trillion? Make a roadmap and work as hard as possible to do it. Create a national mission and involve everybody in that. Right. For that, obviously, we will need political continuity. We will need deep reforms in India, which is easier said than done. But if you want to reach the moon, we have to aim for the stars. So.
Operation Sindoor is technically in continuity, but still there have been a couple of major terrorist attacks in India.
Yeah.
Are we biding our time, or what are we doing?
I think Operation Sindoor, if it happens again, let's say Operation Sindoor 2.0, I think it will need US approval now.
Right.
So
it won't be as easy.
It won't be as easy.
But do you see any military action possibility coming up?
It all depends on Pakistan. If they launch another major terrorist attack like what happened last time, which set off Operation Sindoor, well, then India will have no choice but to respond. And this time the response could be way more drastic than the last time.
But perhaps it is delayed because they already have aggression on two other borders?
Well, actually, it's a great time to do more aggression now, right? So Pakistan is already embroiled in the Afghanistan war, in a war with Afghanistan. Actually, this is a good time.
This is a good time for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it looks like the government of India now needs US approval to do certain things.
Right.
So,
thank you so much, Abhijit.
It's
been a pleasure. It's been fun. We did this after a long time.
Yeah.
And I hope we can keep recording these episodes once in a while.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.